All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the final installment in the Brandeis Innovation Summer Speaker Series. We really hope that you've enjoyed taking part in the program, and we have a phenomenal speaker here tonight. Who's going to be talking about his own entrepreneurial journey. So if you've become excited by all of the sessions that you've been seeing around branding, fundraising, networking, and so on and so forth, Chris is going to talk about how you can take those entrepreneurial skills you've been developing over the past 2 months and turn them into a successful startup the way he did. So really excited to have him here tonight. So just wanted to go over a couple of really quick housekeeping details. Again, this session is being recorded. If you are not comfortable being present in the recording, you can just go ahead and change your display name and remain off camera, and then your name will not appear in the recording. We're asking that everybody please remain on mute while Chris is speaking. And if you have any questions, just enter them into the chat. And Chris, I take it you're going to do some Q&A, entirely at your discretion when you want to do that. But if you have any questions, you can certainly pop them into the chat before we start up the Q&A. A friendly reminder also is that since this is the final session of the Summer Speaker Series, we have a badge for you. You know, you've worked really hard coming to these sessions week in and week out, and hopefully have learned a lot. So we're going to be issuing a digital badge to anyone who watches 5 of these sessions and fills out a short reflection afterwards. Just a few sentences, a short paragraph about each of the 5 sessions that you watched and what about them you found inspiring. And if you do that, you're going to get a badge that you can add to your LinkedIn profile. You can add it to your portfolio and your resume that you completed this entrepreneurship training. So I know we're all looking to add some feathers to our academic caps. So if that's something you're interested in, keep an eye out. The email that went out to you today has the link to apply for that badge, and we'll also be sending it to you as a follow-up. Now, if you missed some of the sessions and you did not get to see all 5 sessions, we got you. The recordings have all been posted to BrandisInnovation.com, aside from one that is currently in process. So you can watch the recordings and earn your badge that way. We're going to keep the badging opportunity open until the end of August to give you a chance to watch those 5 and earn your badge. So please go ahead and do that. Reward yourself and get the acknowledgement that you deserve for having worked hard over the summer to learn how to be an entrepreneur. We're proud of you, so you should show the world how proud you are of everything that you learned over this summer. Chris Lee is a PhD, an entrepreneur, and a role model to all of us. And we're, again, really honored to have him here tonight. So I'm going to hand over now to Juan Giraldo, and he is the organizer of this summer speaker series, as well as the point person for our Spark Entrepreneurship Accelerator for students, faculty, staff, and alumni. So Juan, take it away.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's a pleasure to welcome you all, and it's a pleasure to have my dear friend, Chris, here in the panel tonight. I'm gonna give just a brief snapshot of his bio because it's such an impressive bio. But Chris is currently the Senior Vice President of Product and Innovation for ConsumerMedical, and formerly he was co-founder and COO of InfiniteMD, which was acquired by ConsumerMedical in 2020. Chris has also a master's from Johns Hopkins University and holds a PhD from the joint Harvard and MIT Division of Health Science and Technology program. He has been elected as Forbes 30 Under 30 and MedTech 40 Under 30, as well as Inc. Top 50 Young Entrepreneurs Under 25. Welcome, Chris.
Juan, very, very kind of you. Thank you guys so much for those kind words. I hope I can live up to them. And as Juan mentioned, we are very dear friends. So I'm happy to. I didn't realize this was I guess the last panel, or the last session of the summer. So I guess I can only say that I'm very honored that I'm here sharing this moment with you guys. It's just a pleasure to be here. I guess the objective tonight is for me to share a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey. I like lively discussion. I didn't necessarily prepare anything. I actually, as a matter of fact, had probably a very unintentional journey into entrepreneurship, but I hope people walk away at least feeling that this is something that is possible for everyone. I never necessarily envisioned myself as an entrepreneur, and to be able to kind of at least put some score some goals, so to speak, and have a first successful exit. As an entrepreneur still early on in his sort of career, I hope this is something that would be useful for everyone else as they consider whether or not this path is for them. I guess so my background, based on all that here, I guess people can see, is in healthcare. I was kind of always a science nerd. I was raised in an Asian family, and so all the way through college, I basically thought I was going to be a physician. So I spent, pretty much the first 22 some odd years of my life thinking that I was going to go to medical school because, I was either going to be a physician, I guess a lawyer, or, an engineer of sorts. Anyways, and so when I wrapped up my undergrad, which at the time was in engineering, I was getting ready to, think that I was going to apply to medical school. Fortunately, I had some mentors at the time who indicated that, perhaps I should take some time off and explore whether or not there are other interests that I had. And truth be told, at the time, I was very much doing what I guess I think people call checklisting. And so I had what, I told myself, what, I'm gonna go explore something. Hopefully it makes my candidacy to medical school even better. It'll get me into a better school, or whatever, give me more scholarship, whatever the rationale I had when I was in my early 20s at the time. And so while I was sort of encouraged to take some time and explore if I had other interests, I discovered there was this program offered at Hopkins called it's like a biodesign program. It's called like the bioengineering innovation design program. And so I figured I'd go do this master's program, walk away with, sort of another feather in my cap, so to speak, and kind of go on my merry way of becoming a physician. I was very surprised that about halfway through this program, it's a very interesting program. It was a program where they kind of brought everyone together. And this, I think, sort of the whole startup scene wasn't as, I guess, there weren't as many educational programs in it back in sort of 2012 as there are now. And so halfway through the program, I discovered I had no desire to be a physician whatsoever. A lot of the program was centered around shadowing clinical providers in a hospital setting to understand where clinical needs are and, what kind of problems to solve, and understand, kind of all the different, both good and of course problematic things with the healthcare system. But as I was doing that, I realized I had no desire whatsoever to be a physician, which was interesting because I had spent 22 some odd years. I'd taken the MCAT. I was like all set to go. Everything was written. All my rec letters were done. I was like going to apply to medical school. And here I am being like, well, this entire thing I kind of prepared my life for is something I have no desire to do. So as I was wrapping up the program, I very much realized I really enjoyed the ability to kind of do a little bit of everything. Maybe some of it is ADD, but a lot of it was also just feeling like I had the capability to do more than just kind of follow what others have laid out ahead of me. And so, but it was also somewhat confusing because I spent all this time preparing to do this one thing. So it's like, what the hell do I do now? And so I graduated from the program, and I kind of joke about this sometimes, but I essentially discovered a bunch of things I didn't want to do. And so I first went into management consulting for a little bit. I wasn't there very long, but sort of immediately afterwards, I was doing management consulting, and I was just like making PowerPoint slides all day, and it I think it is, a lot of stuff is very interesting, but I really felt like I wasn't really offering any of the clients like anything necessarily that real. I felt like I was hired by management to mitigate the risk of their decisions. So the projects were cool, but I always felt like whatever recommendations we came up with didn't necessarily get implemented. Like, why were we really there? And so I did that for a little bit, but in my back pocket, I had sort of applied to go do a PhD. I had done this again because I was fortunate to have some other mentors at that time. Thinking through, because I was very torn, because on one hand, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to kind of one day work towards starting my own business, but A, I didn't quite know how, and B, I wasn't necessarily from a family where my parents or my family could really support me and just allow me to maybe just like take large chunks of time off to build something. And so, but I was very torn, because on one hand, the job was pretty fun. I certainly, for the first time, since college, was feeling like I was making a real paycheck and not living paycheck to paycheck and like eating ramen in the middle of the night. And so I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to give that up and go back to grad school, which seemed to me at the time as taking a huge step back because I was essentially, going to like go do research and learn more, which wasn't necessarily aligned with going out there and starting a business. And again, I feel like this story is very much sort of my story. There are literally a million different ways that people can launch successful companies, but this was kind of how I rationalized it in my head at the time. Anyways, and so I kind of went back and forth. I actually talked to maybe another 24 different people. And I ultimately decided, hey, if I go to a graduate program, one thing that's kind of cool about PhD in this country is that they pay you to do a PhD. They don't pay you very much, but at least it was enough to like cover living expenses. But B, I figured I'd be in an environment with lots and lots of really, really smart people that all might hopefully share some of my interests, that I might be able to find the folks that hopefully I could call my co-founders in the future, and just be in an environment where there were a lot of fresh ideas, a lot of fresh perspectives, and just sort of a lot of idea flow is kind of what I called it. And so I decided that I ultimately would go do my PhD, but I had a very different intention from day one. I knew I wasn't going to be an academic, so I did truly kind of what I could, like the bare minimum, because this is being recorded, but I did what I needed to do to complete my PhD degree. But my intention was always that I wanted to do something else. So, during the day, I did what I could in terms of, whatever research. I got in lab, just like got out, tried to be as efficient as possible. And in the evenings, I basically just put myself out there. I would go to a number of like networking events. MIT has a business school attached to it, so I was there pretty much every day. I ended up being like adopted by like that year's MBA class of how much I was hanging out over there, just auditing classes. I just find out when classes were, and I just go like listen to the lectures. It doesn't really matter. I wasn't there to get a grade, but I just go and listen. So I like took entrepreneurial finance. I listened in on finance classes. I listened in on accounting classes. I just was trying to be a sponge and soak up information. Anyways, and I think like, there are again, multiple ways to start companies, but I thought there were kind of two tenets. One was, people coalesce around a particular idea to solve a problem, solve a pain point. That's particularly important in healthcare. So, you're able to align interests based on people's interest in solving a particular issue. Or you might be able to identify folks that you align with, whether, on ideals or morals or, drive, et cetera, and form a team, and then maybe go find something to solve. And so I was very fortunate that I was able to find some folks that I really, really wanted to work with. We really thought that we made a really, really good team. And that's ultimately how we decided to kind of pursue our entrepreneurial journeys, because there were some other folks that were also at that time very interested. In a lot of ways, when you identify your co-founders, it's kind of like a marriage. Although I've never been married, I think the relationship, Juan could tell you, the relationship can be even more intense, because you go through a lot of ups and downs often more downs than ups, just because, the journey is filled with a lot of trials and tribulations. So I, found my co-founders for Infinite. This was a guy named Babak Movassagi. He was this, a brilliant sort of executive MBA at Sloan at the time, and we thought that we made a great duo in terms of starting a business together. Now that I'm kind of coming out on the other end, I actually think, like, for those of you that are maybe in a graduate program or maybe in like a PhD program, if you're interested in doing a business, being in school is the perfect time to do it. The reason I say that is, one, the opportunity cost I think is quite low because you are already in school. So, like, worst case, you finish with the degree you were going to have anyways, and so it's a great time where you're able to sort of, experience all the other resources that you're there. Or, when you're in any sort of program, usually the schools have tons of additional resources. I mean, there's grants, there's business plan competitions, there's the schools usually typically have incubators and accelerators. You get free prototyping services. There's like dedicated lab space. There's just a lot of other things that being in that environment, I think, is very rich, and that sometimes makes it a little bit tougher if, you're kind of out in the world by yourself. And so anyways, this is right now in 2015, 2016, my co-founder Babak and I decided that we'd make, an incredible team together. And the idea for Infinite, which was sort of this telemedicine play or telehealth play, where we provide individuals with expert medical opinions, sort of rose also with some ways through our life stories. We were both essentially, first generation immigrants, where we kind of became the de facto people in our families for coordinating our relatives' care. We would, our random uncles would call us, our aunts would call us about, oh, so and so has this new diagnosis, like, what do you think? And we very quickly realized that, we don't think that this is a problem that only affects us. And so, we ended up launching Infinite, which was both a service as well as a software platform that, God forbid, someone that has breast cancer, well, we'd be able to connect you with the world's leading expert in breast cancer oncology to have a second opinion. There are just so many, procedures that are unnecessary. There are a lot of, individuals, who are potentially misdiagnosed or, treated not necessarily with the latest and greatest. And so that ended up being the genesis of kind of that company. But as a whole, it was an interesting journey, so to speak, because, I didn't know if that necessarily, like, I set out to be an entrepreneur. I really found out that, one, I knew I didn't want to do research. Two, I didn't like consulting. I actually at some point interned at like an investment hedge fund too, and realized I didn't love pure investing to, sort of just looking at that either. So I've kind of discovered a lot of different things that I ultimately realized I didn't love, that led me to really just creating and forging my own path. While I was in grad school, pretty much everyone told me that it was not possible to build both a company and do my PhD at the same time. As a matter of fact, I think pretty much everyone I spoke to told me that it wasn't possible. Everyone told me, no, you either won't be able to finish your PhD on time. And people also told me, no, well, you won't be able to, have, start a business and have the business, sort of also be successful. But I guess I feel like I was able to prove some of those individuals wrong. Actually, we got funded while I was still in grad school. So like in the day I'd run cell cultures, and in the evening I'd work on hiring people. I kind of live this dual life, and only include different people into the different aspects of my life on a need to know basis. But it ended up, I think, being an incredible experience. I'm definitely, in thinking about, what I can do again in the future. I think maybe the other thing that I reflect on as maybe the most substantial learning experience is what I've learned about myself. I think that's actually probably one of the bigger journeys in entrepreneurship. You evolve as a business, but you personally as an individual evolve. I had to face a number of my fears of, thinking being told like I couldn't do certain things, or being told that, certain things couldn't be done, to be able to kind of face some of those challenges, to be able to face my inner demons, whether it's related to confidence, whether it's related to my sense of achievement, whether it was related to my sense of, hey, I'm taking money from someone, am I going to be able to like give them their money back, right? And so I think my personal growth, looking back now, far exceeds actually, a lot of the business aspects of what I've been able to learn. You can learn business, you can learn how to code, you can learn how to build an MVP, but I think what you don't realize is how much you learn as a whole, in terms of like your own character, what you care about, what drives you, what you're scared of, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and all that stuff. Anyways, I feel like I've been rambling for a little bit, but I'd love to make this session maybe a little bit more interactive. And so maybe we can just jump into more of a discussion rather than have it be me lecturing to everyone for the next 40 minutes, because I don't have that much material.
All right, I can go ahead. I have a question for you, Chris. It was a very entertaining path. So I was wondering if you could share with us, what was the single most difficult thing that you had to do in your while creating your business?
There's so many. I don't know if there's like one single thing. I mean, I'll give you some very real examples. Like when we were building a company, we almost ran out of money 3 times. This is where we, at the time, we had employees, and we had a checking account of like a couple $100, and payroll was due in 48 hours. And so there were very real instances, like operational instances, where we had difficulties like that. I think, if I look back, I think one of the most difficult things now that I look is that we made some decisions we made at the time based out of fear. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, maybe if we do this, we'll run out of money in 6 months. So we'll somehow compromise and build this feature instead. Or, I don't know, the market doesn't necessarily know if this is like the thing that, that we could believe in, believe it, but, we don't know if whether or not like this is the right thing to do, or, you know what, this expert, this board member or this advisor told us like this thing should be done this way because it's always done this way. So I think there were some decisions looking back that we made out of fear. Now, I'm not saying that they were necessarily bad decisions, because we still, I think, navigated to a point where we built a valuable service, we built a valuable platform, and we were able to, exit the company. But there's some moments where I wish I could maybe go back and have the decision again and not make it out of fear, knowing like what we were able to accomplish, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, I have a question for you as well. What would you give yourself 5 or 6 years ago as an advice to yourself? What would you say to yourself when you were thinking about starting a business? What would you have done differently?
Yeah, I think one, I would have followed my intuition a little bit more. As a younger founder, and as someone who kind of, is academically minded, I tend to have a deference to expertise and experts. Hey, this person's got lots of letters after their name, or this person has done this 10 times. They must know what they're talking about. Sure, maybe 9 out of 10 times they're right, but that still means 1 out of 10 times they're wrong. And I think you'd be surprised as founders to learn actually how many people are just trying their hardest despite dollar amounts that they've exited or dollar amounts that they raised. I think you'd be surprised as to how little some of these people sometimes might know regarding something. That's why large companies just get disrupted. That's why there's always a space for new technology and new innovation. So I think one is there would be instances where you should follow your own intuition a little bit more. Why do I say that? You're the person waking up every day fighting for your survival, so you live it, you breathe it, you experience it more so than what anybody else can tell you after listening to you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That doesn't mean they're necessarily wrong though, but sort of honing in on that intuition, understanding who to listen to and who not to listen to, when to listen to whom, I think is a piece of advice I would give it. The second thing I would say is this notion of fear that I have. I wish I could take back some times where I made a potential decision out of fear, whether that was because, A, I don't think I can, or B, like, oh, we didn't raise enough money. Look at this company. They've raised 10x more than we have. I would do, I think, everything I could to be able to push that out of my brain space. I think it's an unproductive exercise. And I think in the end, it just, it caused more, what I like to call like brain damage than be, I think, more conducive to the process of building something. And then I think the third thing I would also say is that it's harder than, I think I'll tell myself it was a little bit harder than I thought it was going to be. When I first started, I was like, oh yeah, like calculus is, I'm good at math, although I can't like do calc now, but like, I'm like, oh, math is easy. Like, oh, like I killed Orgo. Like people told me that was hard. And then like in some ways thought that, maybe it was very naively that, the journey was going to be a lot more, I guess, hey, here's a problem. This is how you line up the solution. You put the two together, problem's gone forever, move on to the next thing. But it wasn't quite like that. Just so many more emotions involved. So I think for me, it was honing in on sort of the rapid education of my emotional intelligence. Sort of the faster, if I could learn that a little bit quicker, to be able to understand, how to ask a question to get the answers that you want, to be able to master kind of the influence, if you will, of others, your advisors, your boards, your investors, is something that I wished I learned a little bit earlier on too, because not so much your sort of how much is actually really a lot of the other things. So if I look back, I think those are kind of the three things I would tell myself now, having gone through this journey a couple of times.
Great.
I have a question too. So obviously part of being a founder is developing your leadership. What advice would you have to your younger self about developing a leadership style? Or do you need a leadership style at all, honestly? Or do you just need to try to do your best to lead?
So I think that's a very tough question to answer, because I think, yes, absolutely. I think everyone should work on, as a young leader, I think I think very early on, once we started kind of raising some money, I realized, hey, I was hiring people. Actually, some of the people I was hiring were older than me, or much older than me, or had a lot more work experience than I did. Who am I to tell them, X, Y, and Z? I think, looking back, and comes back a little bit to the discussions we've had around sort of fear and leaning into our intuition. A lot of things that I thought, or we thought as founders early on to be right, or to be the right hypothesis, or to be the right vision, did end up turning out to be the right direction for the company. Again, like I said, you live it, you breathe it, this is what you do. I think and also I think the concept of what a leadership style is very unique to everyone, right? So, for some, I, for example, used to tend to avoid conflict, which was not a good thing in a young leader. A lot of times there was just a lot of wasted time and energy from not addressing certain issues up front directly. So I think what I can say to this is, for young leaders, I think everyone should strive to be coachable. What do I mean by that? You should be really open-minded to be able to kind of like be a sponge, and to be able to soak in kind of the best practices from everyone. I have, for example, I would sit in these meetings and I watch others. I would take note of who had very effective communication techniques, who was able to, diffuse a tense situation, and I would emulate them. I would even also emulate characters that weren't even real. Like, for example, it doesn't even have to be someone you know. It could be like a movie character. It could be like your favorite fictional character. Sometimes I would tell myself, like, what would this person do in this situation? And of course, kind of seeking the advice. So I would say one, in terms of refining your own leadership, one is, I think you should be highly coachable. And then I think two is, what I've come to learn more and more is that good leadership is more about good listening, and to really listen to what people are saying, to be able to actually understand, rather than like hearing something immediately go like, I'm going to try to solve that. Take time to listen, take time to digest. And so, I would say that's two. And then and ultimately, I do care very deeply about the company. I did care very deeply about our product. And so I think we were able to just carry that through to set, as an example for the folks we were able to hire. I'm still certainly working on my leadership style. There are a lot of things I think I did right. There are a lot of things that certainly I have even looking on to improve myself. But I guess I would say those were kind of the things I would say. Being coachable and listening is probably, for me as a young leader, the more important traits that I was able to collect earlier on.
Awesome. Thank you.
We have a couple of questions in the chat, Chris. So I'm gonna go ahead and read one from Matthew. I saw drug delivery in your profile description. Could you talk about what you did / plan to do along those lines?
Happy to. Actually, the first company I launched before Infinite was a drug delivery company. It was called Recon Therapeutics. And the short of it is we bootstrapped the hell out of it. I mean, there was a cycle where I think for maybe 2 years, we had we had participated in nearly 50 business plan competitions and applied for grants and all that stuff. From the science side of things, I really, really like drug delivery. I just think it's a fascinating field. I like the science aspect of it. I like the engineering aspect of it. It was kind of a good intersection of all the interests that I had. But anyways, we launched this company. It was actually a point of care delivery device for mixing medications or injectables rather, that need to be reconstituted. These are things that are like in a powdered form that you need to reconstitute with a liquid because you can't inject a powder. These are for a lot of times, drugs that aren't necessarily stable in a liquid form, which is why they're freeze dried and kept in a powder form. So when you need it, you mix it essentially with a fluid and then you inject it yourselves. We spent many years actually trying to bootstrap this company. And ultimately it didn't necessarily go anywhere for a variety of reasons. We can go into a postmortem of why that company didn't work, if that's something of interest to the group. But I did try to do a drug delivery company. More recently, I also actually this is like not sort of on my public profile, but I have been trying to commercialize the work I did in my PhD. Over the course of my PhD, I developed a treatment to help patients who have kidney stones receive a locally delivered therapeutic to be able to more expediently or more quickly expel their stones. That needs the capital structures of commercializing like a digital health company versus like an inhuman drug is just very, very different. Just things are a lot more expensive when it comes to doing studies with humans. That's still sort of ongoing in the background. My main focus isn't that right now. However, that is something that we have tried to work on in the past. This was with my thesis advisor and some other brilliant academic minds. So that is something else I have tried in the drug delivery field as well.
I have another question from the chat, Chris. What is your opinion of university tech transfer offices? Is there good tech out there to bring to commercialization?
Yeah. I wouldn't, I'm not necessarily the expert here, but I've done tech transfer a couple of times. I've licensed, I would say, or at least gone through the negotiations for 3 technologies through licensing them from academic institutions. I'm actually currently helping another professor out of MIT. I'm helping Jeff Karp try to commercialize something out of his lab. right now too. I think look, tech transfer offices, I think have gotten actually less friendlier over the years. Even I've seen this at MIT, it used to be super friendly because a lot of universities were just very open to having people commercialize stuff because it's better to have someone working on it than have it to collect dust on a shelf, so to speak. But I think, a lot of institutions in the US now have seen, whether it's some of the more successful ones or whatever, but that there's a lot of value in these technologies that are tied up in an academic center. Long story short, I do see that there is value in terms of sort of working with tech transfer. Of course, I think, it's all about kind of how you negotiate the deals. They have gotten, like I said, less friendly where for example, MIT now wants certain amounts of equity, and they also maybe want milestone-based payments and stuff like that. Whereas before, maybe it was just a licensing fee. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. What I ultimately believe on for trying to license technologies out of universities is going back to kind of the tenets of entrepreneurship, which is whether or not the technology solves a real problem. I think there are a lot of cool mousetraps often, but if you understand a landscape and you understand a particular area where yes, this has added leverage in terms of actually solving a real problem, then of course there's value in commercializing it. But it kind of comes back to, I think, entrepreneurship 101, where it's what is this solving for the customer, or when what's the business model, and then if that makes sense to then license something out of a university, you do it.
Quick question, Chris. This is mine. A lot of entrepreneurs think about the exit as the end of the path. Can you talk to us a little bit more on the lessons learned while you were going through that exit with your company?
Yeah. First, I would say it is a super emotional journey. I would say in terms of the exit, is weirdly as how a lot of entrepreneurs, or I'm not weirdly, but when entrepreneurs work towards an exit, I think the worst thing that can happen, and actually I think a lot of people will say the same thing, is if you kind of start counting the exit before it happens, because you start to lose your edge, if you will. If you're cool, I have this company that's maybe interested in buying us, we'll just focus on this and stop focusing on the company. So I think first and foremost, if an exit is in the potential exit is in the imminent future, you have to somehow compartmentalize your mind to pretend that it doesn't exist. You have to essentially tell yourself, I'm still going to come to work every day and work on what I think is right for the company. I'm still going to do, product in the way that I'm going. I'm going to run operations in the way that I do. Oh, there just happens to be this added task I need to do, which is kind of go through the diligence process of, potentially maybe merging my company with an acquirer. It's surprisingly difficult. I think now that I've gone through it once, hopefully the next time I'll be better at it. But it's very emotional because, on one hand, you're like, hey, this is an opportunity for, I have this thing I've always wanted, but then at the same time, you got to still also be the captain of the ship. So I think the first thing is you got to pretend it somehow doesn't exist, even though it's looming and it's a big action item, because I think as soon as you kind of go that way, you end up losing a little bit in terms of your own vision and building your own company, because the deal's not done until it's done. I think then if one does decide to do that, then there are a lot of there are a lot of very operational based considerations. One, am I going to be able to find a home for all these employees? Are they hiring everyone? Who are they hiring? Are these folks going to be incentivized to join this new organization? What is that going to look like? Is there going to be, room for growth for your team? Is it an acqui hire, or are they looking to just get a technology and cut everyone, right? So there are some then kind of very real life considerations that then you kind of have to think through. But for us, we did focus on a cultural fit. We thought it was important to since in this merger, in our particular merger, to ensure that there was a cultural fit between the employees that we had with the culture of the company that we were merging with. So we over-indexed for that a little bit. Yeah, I think every M&A is very unique. But I think if were to be the biggest piece of advice I would give would be, you just have to somehow go through it thinking that it's not there, which is very difficult. It's harder said than it's done, right? Easier said than it's done. I mean.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a question. So earlier you mentioned that when you were pursuing your PhD and your company at the same time, a lot of people advise you not to do both things. So what would your general advice for someone that is pursuing more than one thing at a time and still wants to keep shooting at both?
Sorry, would you mind repeating that last part? Something about pursuing more than one thing.
What's your advice for someone that is pursuing more than one thing and still wants to keep both of them?
I'm not saying I think there are other models where people have been able to do that. I mean, nowhere I'm would I ever say far, far away from, for example, Elon Musk, right? But Elon, I think, is someone who's been able to balance this a little bit. I think he's been able to work on disparate things and do them well. Actually, a lot of I think more closer examples even are some maybe professors that I mean, I know some academics who are successful entrepreneurs where they've been able to co-found companies that are able to spin technologies out of their labs, but also maintain a very dynamic and vibrant and innovative research environment. I think at the end of the day, if there's a will, there's a way. I don't necessarily believe in limitations, or I believe in having sort of limits in any way. But I think it just ultimately comes down to how you're able to split mind share. I felt that for me, I was working on healthcare research, but also trying to build a healthcare company. So in a way, they were somewhat conducive. They were somewhat similar. I wasn't I was trying to, I don't know, build a mining robot, for oil or something, and then also doing research in the day during drug delivery. And maybe that is harder. I don't know. But I did feel as a whole, at least for me, the things, although they were disparate, at least we're all in healthcare. So in some ways they were able to kind of build off of each other. But another thing too is as you're able to start getting, I guess, little successes, in a way, it kind of gives you the data points to show that you're able to do this. So every single time I was able to say win a business plan competition, but then also still be able to succeed in my lab and get the data that I needed, it gave me a little bit more confidence, hey, I could do these two things at once. So I think you kind of collect data points along the way that demonstrate that you're able to do these two things. That being said, in 2018, after I graduated, I did spend 2 years full-time on my company because it did need the intention of sort of being full-time. And that helped grow the company a lot too. So who knows, maybe if I was 100% full-time from day one, we would have had a different exit story. But I definitely feel I was able to split my mind share between two things, do them well. But in the end, at least after I graduated, I did focus for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks.
But I would also say, just don't let people tell you no and think you can't do it just because they said you can't, because screw them.
Another question is, I think that partnerships are very important for business, and I know that your partnership with Babek was really strong.
Mm-hmm.
You have talk to us a little bit more on best practices to keep a strong partnership, or what worked for you, words of wisdom regarding partnerships.
Yeah, I think one is, I think it's going to sound so obvious, but it's definitely pick someone that you enjoy spending time with. You're going to see that person a lot when you build a business. And I mean a lot. You're going to see them when they're not showered. You're going to see them, in the middle of the night when things go wrong, you jump on like a Zoom call or, at 1 a.m. You're going to see a lot of good, but you're also going to see each other at your worst. So, if I would say, if it's someone you can get along with even at their worst, then it's a good relationship. I mean, I think the second thing is just an abundance of communication, almost over communication. I mean, we were very transparent with each other. We tried to always give each other feedback. We tried to always help each other improve. I think that was actually something that, looking back, was a very good part of our relationship, in the sense that we always pushed each other to be better. I know that sounds obvious, but I see a lot of, whether it's through, acquaintances, friends, or, other companies, I see a lot of relationships where they're not necessarily conducive and they can be quite toxic. And I think the last thing really was, and there's so much more, but like, I think another key thing was that we just really believed in each other. I really believed in Bobak, and I think he really believed in me. And we just genuinely felt that the two of us together were unstoppable, and we were able to accomplish anything we set our minds to. And I think to be able to have that level of trust, was invaluable, because we wouldn't have been able to do what we did without that. I think, everyone has their journey there, but I'm sure maybe you guys have learned through this class, but, a large proportion of companies fail because of not the product, not necessarily because of funding, but because, the founder's dilemma, right? I forgot what the exact is, 30%, 40%, something like that. Companies fail because of what's called founder's dilemma, where essentially the company implodes from the inside based on differences in personality. I mean, Juan, you're absolutely right. It is one of the most important dynamics, especially in an early company, but it's hard to articulate in a short amount of time. I mean, Juan, you can comment a little bit about your dynamic with your co-founder, Nico, for example.
Yes, I think for us, it's been crucial to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each one of us, and know that the other person is actually complementing your abilities, basically. So together, definitely 1 + 1 = more than 2, so it definitely helps have a stronger team. And then I think it's all about trust. It's trusting that when you're not around, the other person always is looking for the company's best interest and your best interest. They're always thinking about that as the priority.
And I know some of this sounds like so obvious, but it's interesting how, as you're building and how as you're growing, how sometimes these things all of a sudden take a back seat, and so to just kind of be hyper aware of it, because it sounds so obvious. I know it does. It sounds so obvious, but like then as you build a company, all of a sudden you start realizing like you lose sight of some of these things.
We have a great question here of the early days of the company, Chris. How did you get physicians in the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey to join the program?
Great question. When we first started, basically we would beg and beg and beg. We would just send like emails. We would go camp outside of some doctors' offices because you could see where their offices were, and we'd just be like, please do this kind of like please. And so a lot of hustle at the beginning. I think for us, actually, we even had it maybe one step easier, I would say, being that we were in the healthcare industry. At least we knew some doctors, right? So I'd work in science and clinical medicine. My co-founders had careers in medicine. And so we were and also mentioning we had a third co-founder for a while. Her name was Liz, who was a physician, and so she was also able to bring in some of her colleagues. But it was very hard initially because we really had to like beg people to do it. Over time, in our case, we were a consult platform, so we were able to also, sort of show the physicians the quality of what we were trying to do, as well as, you know, the experience the physicians had. So over time it got easier. It was kind of a snowball effect. So it took like 2 years to get maybe the first 100 doctors. And then it took 2 more years to get the next 2,000 doctors, because at some point it just became a snowball effect where we started to make a name for ourselves. People kind of knew what we were doing. People would make intros, and that just made things a lot easier. But I think it's like with anything, you know, it's like, you see these companies that have the hockey puck growth, or whether with sales, you know, for us, we had that when it came to our physician network. The first 100 were really damn hard. The next 2,000 were a lot easier.
That's awesome. We have another question from Andrea. What is your opinion of real world experience in being an entrepreneur?
When others say, why don't we think about winding down? Is there an age? Great. So there's a couple questions here. So I think, so certainly, you know, I can say, like, I guess, you know, for the second time you do it or the third time you do it, it's a lot easier than the first time you do it. So, I think that's why, you know, you do see the statistic that, like, you know, founders maybe that do their second company or a third company, it's easier for them to find funding. I think part of it's just because you don't have to do the relearning of all this early stuff that you didn't realize you had to learn. I think no, there's not an age limit to becoming an entrepreneur. Actually, Juan, maybe you know this too, but there's actually, I believe it was MIT or someone, they actually did a study and showed that the average age of successful first-time founders where they like exit a company, it's actually like 43, 44 or something like that. It's much, much older than people think. The media tends to make it think that every sort of billion-dollar entrepreneur is like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. As a matter of fact, that is very, very rare. That's actually, you know, very much like the 0.0001 percentile of the entrepreneurial's sort of journey. So no, I don't believe there's an age limitation at all. You know, have anyone, you know, some of you guys have seen the movie like The Founder, for example, you know, you realize like, you know, the guys that started McDonald's, I think did something, it was like 55 or something like that. So no, there's no age limit. I think it very much comes down to whether or not you feel passionate or compelled. And truly, like you wake up and you're like, I live and breathe this, I want to solve this. I can't imagine a world where this doesn't exist. You know, we couldn't imagine a world where someone has a breast cancer diagnosis and they couldn't connect with like the best person in the world, at least get their advice, right? And so I do not see age as a limitation. Does real world R&D experience count in getting funding? Yeah, I think absolutely. I think actually the one thing that's interesting about entrepreneurship is I think it's actually a great leveling field. You can be the smartest person ever. You can be the best executive ever and had the most successful P&L at a huge company, but that doesn't necessarily mean like you're able to maybe, you know, start the next Uber or something like that. Very different skill sets. I think actually all different types of skills count towards helping a founder get money. Now, of course, you have to have some sort of basic fluency in terms of like managing a cap table, understanding how to negotiate and like how to do the financing stuff. So, you know, if someone's purely coming from like a science degree without maybe, or a science, you know, lab experience without that stuff, then, you know, maybe, yeah, you would have to find a co-founder that has more business experience to complement that. But it's much easier to learn business from an R&D science perspective than the other way around. It gives you the critical lens, it gives you a critical eye to maybe do some of the more detailed stuff that other people wouldn't. So yeah, I think every type of experience helps you getting funded. Although, you know, I think at different times in the company, different skills might be a little bit more useful than others, depending on like what the objective is at hand. I hope that answers that question.
Great. We have another one in the chat, Chris, another tactical one. How did you market your platform to the client's patients in the beginning? Any tips on successful marketing for people who are just starting their company?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we had a two-sided marketplace. One, we kind of had to market to the physicians to make them like super excited about it because, you know, we were in a field where like kind of one bad review from a top physician would kind of poison like that department. And at the same time, we also had patients. So we followed what was, this is kind of like the startup mantra, right? So we developed an MVP. We never initially developed like a super in-depth product. Like on the front end, we were A/B testing things like where buttons go, where this would go. We would have very specific hypotheses that we laid out, testing them with very specific sort of endpoints in mind, with like very specific results we were trying to find. Like, so, I remember initially our physician view was pretty complex. We had built all these features into it, and we very quickly A/B tested it with a bunch of physicians and realized they hated it. So we took out all these different features that we otherwise would have spent lots and lots of money in terms of building. And so, there are a lot of resources in terms of, sort of like the lean startup methodology in terms of A/B testing, failing quickly, failing fast, setting specific criteria on what you're trying to get out of, sort of all that, finding sort of that product market fit. And so that was kind of how we were able to do that at the beginning. We developed an MVP, and we just try to go as fast as we can without necessarily incurring too many expenses that would ultimately like serve to be detrimental. I think that would be the biggest thing I would give in terms of marketing, is just testing these little things. You're lean, you're scrappy, you're small. So you have to, you're not going to win against the large companies based on money because you don't have any. So you got to win based on your wits. And that's how you do it.
Awesome. Well, we want to be respectful of Chris's time. So if there is any burning last question, this is the time.
Wait, guys, please fill out this survey. I just put it in the chat. It's just for us, so we know, so we can keep on offering content that is relevant and helpful for you guys. So if you could fill out this survey, it would help us a lot.
I do want to wrap up this talk with a few takeaways that I've been taking notes from your talk, Chris. A lot of the attendees are students, so I wanna drive home a few takeaway points. So one of them is the importance of mentors and looking for advice whenever you're a young entrepreneur. So key, I think, in Chris's success has been that ability to ask for advice and to listen. I think another one is being part of an ecosystem that helps you thrive and that offers you resources that can allow you to be successful. Put yourself out there and show up. I think that the example of Chris is going to Sloan and taking business classes, even though he wasn't a student there, is great. Be coachable, be like sponge, learn all that you can is another good one. Take advantage of all the resources that are mostly free in university. The Maker Lab, the office space, the professors, etc. Work on your emotional intelligence. It seems it's critical to develop your emotional intelligence to develop your company. Leadership equals good listening, and that I love that, Chris, and I agree. It's basically your role as a leader is to help your team, and if you don't understand what they need, if you don't listen, you can't. Obviously, the importance of grit, and that's exemplified by the example of how hard it was the first 100 doctors, but then how that snowballed after that process. And then MVPs, and we talk a lot about that in the Spark program. Test everything very lean and very quickly. So thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate all the insights and knowledge that you have shared today. I know that you guys are exchanging some messages. We want to be very respectful of your time. So any last question to Chris, this is the time. Or if not, thank you again.
I hope this was helpful, or at least in somewhat entertaining. So thank you everyone for the privilege and the opportunity. And I left my email in the thing, so feel free to reach out if that would be helpful. And I appreciate everyone, and good luck. I hope everyone strives to become an entrepreneur.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you so much for coming.
Of course, guys. Take care. Reach out anytime. Thank you, Juan, for the opportunity.
Thank you, man. Bye.
All right. Have a great night, guys.
Juan, do you know where I can find the recordings? Because Christina mentioned Brandeis Innovation, but I did not find anything there.
You're gonna receive it on the email. Actually, you should have received an email probably yesterday if you were registered for this event. Así que ahí están los recordings.
Okay.
O si no, apenas tenga yo el link, te lo paso.
Dale, perfecto, pues muchas gracias, cuídate.
Dale, bye.